What are we going to do about South Africa as part of AGOA?
Well,
I mean, South Africa is clearly not America's friend.
that's correct.
The pettiness of MAGA. Oh my God. So because they were offended about the G20 episode last week, they removed South Africa off AGOA. AGOA is the African Growth and Opportunity Act, which was enacted in 2000. So it was pretty much a law that gave preferential economic benefits for Africans who want to trade and do business with the USA.
I guess what President Trump did was a wake-up call for us. A wake-up call in saying that we need to upgrade our relations, our trade relations with many other countries in the world. He said we're finding many countries receptive. And some of them are saying, we've been waiting for you. What took you so long?
For years, U.S. chicken flooded African markets, undercutting local farmers and dominating shelves. But today, everything changed. In a stunning move, South Africa has officially blocked U.S. chicken imports, and the fallout is massive. American exporters are staring at a $450 million loss, while South African farmers are celebrating the biggest victory they've had in decades.
South Africa, long perceived as a stable but secondary agricultural exporter, has suddenly taken center stage by securing a $25 billion sorghum deal with China, an agreement large enough to disrupt the balance of power between nations and redefine global demand dynamics almost instantly. What makes this moment explosive is not just the size of the deal, but the speed at which it dismantled a relationship the United States believed was guaranteed. Overnight, America lost its biggest sorghum market, a critical export route that many assumed China would rely on for decades.
What are we going to do about South Africa as part of AGOA?
Well,
I mean, South Africa is clearly not America's friend.
That's correct. We've had some conversations with the South Africans when it comes to trade, and again, there are a lot of kind of foreign policy issues that I don't get into with South Africa, but when it comes to trade, they have a lot of barriers, not just tariff, but non-tariff barriers, et cetera. We've made clear to the South Africans that if they ever want to have a better tariff situation with us, they need to take care of these tariffs and non-tariff barriers. They're a real economy, they're a big economy, right? They have an industrial base, they have an agricultural base, they should be buying things from the United States.
But if you extend AGOA for 1 year without reforming it, that's going to benefit South Africa, right?
I mean, it could. I would say we have a 30% reciprocal tariff on South Africa right now, which is much higher than the rest of the continent. So we'll control for it a little bit. But I think South Africa is a unique case. I agree with you, if that's your point.
Don't you think we ought to separate South Africa and AGOA?
I mean, I'm happy to consider that, right? I mean, Congress has come to me and said, we want AGOA. And I think if we're going to have a giveaway, we need to figure out how to improve it. If you think that we should give South Africa different treatment, I'm open to that because I think they are a unique problem.
Well, they're a unique problem for America.
Correct.
I mean, they're our enemy right now. I mean, they're buddies with all of our enemies, and they've been very critical of the United States.
That's exactly right, and that's why they're actually treated in a much different way. Most of the African continent, sub-Saharan Africa, has just a 10% tariff, and South Africa has a 30%.
I guess what President Trump did was a wake-up call for us. Not so much because we were not trading with other countries, but a wake-up call in saying that we need to upgrade our relations, our trade relations with many other countries in the world. So we've now embarked on an outreach program, which is led by our Minister of Trade and Industry and Competition, Minister Tau. And we're going around the world and improving our trade relations with many other countries. And we're finding many countries receptive. And some of them are saying, we've been waiting for you. What took you so long? So we are now establishing setting up a number of trade relations, free trade areas or free trade agreements with many parts of the world, the Middle East, in Asia, and Latin America as well.
Popular animal product in South Africa is poultry meat. And now that $20 billion market is at the center of a trade disagreement with the U.S. The U.S. is warning South Africa that it could lose a lucrative trade deal if it doesn't open up that market.
Welcome back. The dispute between South Africa and the United States over chicken import duties continues. to hang over South Africa's extended inclusion in the African Growth and Opportunity Act, AGOA. Two United States senators have threatened to try to block South Africa from the lucrative US-Africa trade agreement if the country doesn't lift import duties on cheaper cuts of chicken.
South Africa just sent a message Washington never saw coming. For years, U.S. chicken flooded African markets, undercutting local farmers and dominating shelves. But today, everything changed. In a stunning move, South Africa has officially blocked U.S. chicken imports, and the fallout is massive. American exporters are staring at a $450 million loss, while South African farmers are celebrating the biggest victory they've had in decades. This isn't just about chicken, it's about power, trade, and who controls the future of Africa's food economy. And the moment this decision hit the global market, analysts started calling it a wake-up call for the United States. Because if one African nation can break away from American agricultural dominance, more could follow. Stay with me, because what comes next might reshape global farming, global politics, and America's position in Africa forever. South Africa's bold decision to block U.S. chicken imports didn't just shake up the agricultural world, it sent shockwaves through global trade, Washington politics, and African economic strategy. This moment is more than a trade ban. It's a tectonic shift in how African nations see themselves, how much economic power they are willing to reclaim, and how the United States handles the reality of losing influence in markets it once dominated. To understand the depth of this story, we must go back to the roots of the chicken trade, the political tensions behind it, and the new wave of African economic independence rising across the continent. For decades, the U.S. has poured cheap chicken into African markets, especially leg quarters, wings, and cuts Americans consume far less. These exports were heavily subsidized, mass-produced, and priced so low that African farmers simply couldn't compete. In South Africa, this became a long-standing battle between local poultry producers and foreign exporters who had the advantage of scale, technology, and subsidized production. As a result, South African farmers often watched their costs rise while cheap imports flooded the shelves, limiting their ability to grow, invest, or dominate their own domestic market. But today, after years of pressure, negotiations, trade disputes, and economic modeling, South Africa finally said, enough. The government announced the immediate suspension of U.S. chicken imports, citing concerns about unfair pricing, economic strain on local farmers, and the need to protect national food security. This decision triggered celebrations among South African poultry associations, farmer unions, and agricultural stakeholders who have been arguing for years that foreign imports weaken local industries and trap countries' independency. For the United States, however, this wasn't just an agricultural setback. It was a multi-million-dollar blow to an industry that has relied heavily on export markets to absorb excess production. The loss of $450 million is not just a number, it represents supply chains disrupted, contracts terminated, farmers pushed into uncertainty, and shipping companies suddenly facing dead roots. It also reflects something much larger: America's slipping grip on African markets. This move didn't come out of nowhere. South Africa has been pushing hard to strengthen its agricultural sector. Government initiatives to boost local poultry production, increase farmer training, improve feed systems, and support smallholder farmers have been underway for years. The country knows the power of controlling its food supply. It understands that when local industries thrive, jobs multiply, economies stabilize, and food inflation becomes manageable. But foreign imports, especially cheap, subsidized ones, can crush this progress in an instant. So when the South African government finally pulled the trigger, it wasn't a rash decision. It was a strategic move, a reclaiming of economic power. And the timing couldn't be more symbolic. Across Africa, nations are rejecting economic patterns that once kept them dependent and vulnerable. Countries like Nigeria, Kenya, Tanzania, and Ghana are implementing new policies that favor local production over foreign imports. The idea is simple: if Africa produces its own food, it keeps its money, controls prices, creates jobs, and builds industries that last generations.
The pettiness of MAGA. Oh my God. So because they were offended about the G20 episode last week, they removed South Africa off AGOA. AGOA is the African Growth and Opportunity Act, which was enacted in 2000. So it was pretty much a law that gave preferential economic benefits for Africans who want to trade and do business with the USA. Now, back then, it probably seemed like a good thing. Oh, they're opening the market to us. Less charges, less stamp duties, da-da-da-da. But no, they use this as a weapon. If you don't do what they like, if you piss them off, they'll just remove you off AGOA. Then that's going to affect the economy and have ramifications on the South African economy. All this because Trump wanted to boycott the G20 in South Africa because he believes South Africa has a GNO side happening. But that's not the case, as we all know. So he boycotted it. He didn't go. The people that went, they were so happy. Yo, you should have seen these leaders without Trump there. They were celebrating. I think one of the leaders was talking smack about Trump as well, saying, listen, we don't need some big mouth baby billionaire causing trouble here. We've had a good meeting. We've had a good discussion. This is awesome without America. Yeah? So America felt left out. Then they were going to send someone, but it was too late. The president of South Africa laughed. Said, yeah, they said they're going to bring someone now to take the gavel because the next G20 is in America. But yeah, sorry, it's too late. So they didn't do the ceremony, the gavel passing ceremony. So because of that, he's pissed and said, okay, I'm removing you off AGOA. I'm renewing it for other African nations. Screw SA, yeah? As an African, I'm happy they're doing this, yeah? Africans need to realize we can't rely on outsiders for the, the goodwill of outsiders. There's no goodwill. They just want to manipulate you and to take control of you, yeah? If you don't do what they like, they put sanctions. They cut you off, these AGOAs and all that nonsense. Is that business? Is that equality? No, there needs to be fairness, fair trade, fairness, okay? And I'm happy he's done that, so that's good. Now, SA, you've got no friend. Americans... Well, the government, is not your friend, South Africa. Yeah? Actually, the whole continent. We all know now. America is not your friend. So fix up and trade together. Because South Africa is going to go through some mad economic troubles because of this. And to him, it's just, because they pissed me off, I'm not going to give them a go. Crazy.
The global agricultural landscape has been shaken by an unexpected shift that few believed possible and even fewer saw coming. A single decision has sent shockwaves through trade circles, markets, and strategic power corridors, rewriting long-standing assumptions about who controls the future of global food supply. South Africa, long perceived as a stable but secondary agricultural exporter, has suddenly taken center stage by securing a 25 billion sorghum deal with China, an agreement large enough to disrupt the balance of power between nations and redefine global demand dynamics almost instantly. What makes this moment explosive is not just the size of the deal, but the speed at which it dismantled a relationship the United States believed was guaranteed. Overnight, America lost its biggest sorghum market, a critical export route that many assumed China would rely on for decades. Instead, the world's largest consumer pivoted sharply toward Africa, signaling a new era in agricultural alliances and exposing vulnerabilities that Washington has long ignored. The abrupt shift has created an atmosphere of disbelief across the industry. Sorghum, once considered a quiet but dependable export crop for the United States, has become the center of a much larger geopolitical recalibration. China's massive order from South Africa is not only a purchase, it is a strategic declaration that Africa is no longer a backup supplier but an emerging powerhouse capable of reshaping global agricultural flows. This transformation did not happen slowly. It unfolded with the kind of decisiveness that forces governments and markets to reconsider everything they thought they understood about trade priorities. One moment, American exporters were confident in their role as China's primary supplier. The next, the market was gone claimed in full by a competitor that has been rapidly strengthening its agricultural infrastructure, technology, and export capacity. The deal's magnitude immediately raised questions about why China made such a dramatic move. The answer lies in a combination of economics, strategy, and shifting global influence. South Africa has spent years investing in its agricultural modernization, from expanding high-yield sorghum production to improving logistics and export efficiency. Labor costs remain competitive, land availability is expanding, and climate adaptability gives the region a comparative advantage in drought-resistant crops like sorghum. Pair these factors with China's long-term strategy of diversifying away from American supply chains, and the result is a deal large enough to rewrite market expectations. China has sent a clear message. It wants agricultural security that is not dependent on U.S. policy, pricing, or geopolitical tensions. The United States, meanwhile, is left confronting a painful reality. Losing its biggest sorghum market overnight is not simply an economic setback. It is a symbolic blow to its agricultural dominance. For decades, American farmers assumed that their scale, technology, and historical trade ties guaranteed a secure position in global markets. The $25 billion shift to South Africa shows that this assumption no longer holds. Competitors are rising, alliances are shifting, and the global order is reshaping itself in ways that challenge the idea that the U.S. is the world's default supplier of essential commodities. International buyers are increasingly prioritizing price stability, long-term trust, and diversification over legacy relationships, leaving U.S. producers vulnerable to sudden market realignments like this one. This development also raises concerns for broader U.S. agricultural exports. If China can move sorghum purchases to Africa this quickly, what prevents similar shifts in maize, soybeans, wheat, or other staple crops? The answer is unsettling: nothing. Global buyers are no longer tied to American supply in the way they once were. Infrastructure investments across Africa, South America, and Southeast Asia are giving emerging economies the ability to compete at scales that threaten U.S. dominance. South Africa's breakthrough sorghum deal is simply the latest and most visible example of this trend. It serves as a warning that agricultural power is moving southwards and eastwards, away from the traditional centers of influence. China's decision also aligns with its broader goal of strengthening economic partnerships across Africa. By choosing South Africa for such a massive purchase, China enhances its role as a long-term development partner while securing access to reliable agricultural supply. This dual benefit makes the deal more than just a trade agreement. It becomes part of a larger geopolitical strategy that unifies infrastructure investments, trade networks, and agricultural flows into a single coordinated.
My people, let's talk. Listen, we've seen political bullying before, but what President Trump is doing to South Africa right now, that's a whole new level. After months of turning South Africa into a political punching bag with a baseless one-sided feud that led him to boycott the first ever G20 on African soil, President Trump has now officially uninvited South Africa to next year's G20 summit in the US. And the reason? Well, he's doubling down on the false claim that has been debunked by virtually everyone that South Africa is committing genocide against its white minority. Yes, the conspiracy theory is now being used as foreign policy. On Truth Social, Trump posted, quote, "South Africa refuses to acknowledge the horrific human rights abuses endured by Afrikaners. Therefore, at my direction, they will not be invited to the 2026 G20 in Miami." Then he escalated it further, saying South Africa is, quote, "not worthy of membership anywhere," and announcing that the U.S. will cut all payments and subsidies immediately. Now, my people, you know South Africa fired back, and fast. They called it, quote, "regrettable that despite President Ramaphosa's attempts to rebuild the relationship, Trump keeps acting on misinformation and distortions." But my people, this isn't just drama. This is a warning sign for the global system. A major G20 member, a founding BRICS nation, being pushed out over a conspiracy. That's not normal. That's a new era of dangerous politics. Ramaphosa didn't just respond to Washington, he addressed the entire G20. He urged them to defend multilateralism, consensus, and equal participation, the very values the G20 is supposed to stand on. So, my people, what should happen next? What should South Africa do, and how should the G20 respond to this kind of political bullying? Let's talk about it in the comments.